Hey everyone, I'm here just to talk to you quickly about English Language Paper One, which you've got tomorrow. Hope it goes well. So I'm just going to talk you through how I would recommend that you approach the paper. So we're going to start off and it's an hour and 45-minute paper. And so we'll talk about the timings, we'll talk about how much each question is worth, and then what you will get marks for. So the first thing I would say is an hour and 45-minute paper, and there are two sections. Section A, which is the sorry, that cut off then. Section A, which is the reading section, and Section B, which is the writing section. So you've got questions 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I would really recommend that you start off with question 5 and you spend 45 minutes on that. So my rule of thumb would be that for the amount of marks that you get on any question, if you add 5 minutes to that, that tells you how many marks you should, how many minutes you should spend on it. So obviously the writing section, it's question 5, is worth 40 marks, and so I would spend 45 minutes on it, and that gives you enough time to plan and to write and to proofread. The first thing I would say is that it's really vital that you plan, because you must paragraph. And so in your plan, you should bullet point out what you're going to include in each paragraph broadly. Don't spend too much time on that. 5 minutes is about the right amount of time. Once you've done that, you need to have a little think about how you could be clever with your paragraphing. So if you're doing a story, maybe even if you're doing a description, bookending, which is where you start and end with the same or similar things, works quite well. Equally, you could just do a one-line paragraph if you want to do something clever with your paragraphing, because that's going to get you marks. So you might as well pop that in. That's easy to do. The next thing after you've done your plan is obviously to write your piece. So I just need to talk about the kind of things that are going to get you marks and what you should be including. So there will be a choice of questions. Do not do both questions, because that's a surefire way to kind of lose loads of marks. Or not gain very many marks, because you'll spend too much time writing too. So don't do that. You pick one. It is likely that you will get a describe and a story, and you will have to choose, but you might not. You might get 2 stories and you might get 2 describes, so we just don't know. And I would say broadly, your piece should be about 1.5 pages to about 2.5 pages. You don't want to go much longer than that, because you probably won't have the right amount of quality for only 45 minutes of writing. And also you need to take the examiner with you, and as soon as it's too long, it becomes difficult as an examiner to kind of carry on and keep reading it over and over again, because you probably will read it twice as an examiner to get it fully marked, maybe even 3 times. So you're going to be aiming for about 1.5 to 2.5 pages. You're going to have decided whether you're doing a story or whether you're doing a describe, or whatever it is that you pick. You might get 2 stories, you might get 2 describes, but you pick one and you do your plan, and then you need to write it. So what kind of things are we looking for? Well, the first thing that we're looking for is a range of sentence structures. So even if you begin with a range of different things, so you might start with an adverb like slowly, enthusiastically, anxiously, that would need a comma. You might start with some ing phrases. They're called present participle phrases for those people who've been taught that, but it doesn't matter. It's easy even if you haven't been taught it, because you're going to start with, like, instead of saying she waited for the bus stop, you can say looking over her shoulder, comma, she waited at the bus stop, or thinking that she was late, comma, she waited at the bus stop. And that way what you do is you show you can vary your sentence structures and you can use commas. So both of those things would get you marks for AO6. You probably want to vary your punctuation. So if you aren't very good at punctuation and you struggle to use anything like semicolons or dashes or anything like that, don't worry about it, because even a question mark and an exclamation mark, a full stop and a comma, and maybe some speech marks or a ... with the ellipsis, those are enough to get you to level 3 for your punctuation range. You don't have to use swanky punctuation, but you do need to have a range, and it does need to be accurate. So I would recommend using those. And don't forget, punctuation-wise, that with things like can't, you put the apostrophe in, and that counts as punctuation too. So I would say aim to be using at least 4 pieces of punctuation. Now, I know that feels a bit like paint by numbers for writing, but actually you do need to hit the mark scheme, and the mark scheme says a range of punctuation. So just deliberately put in some punctuation there. So you've got a range of sentence structures, range of punctuation, high level vocabulary. So again, pick the vocabulary that explicitly means what you want it to. But if I were you tonight, I'd be picking maybe 3 words that I know are really good, that I've either used before, or that I've read or whatever, or that are in my anthology for my poems or something like that, that I know are really good. So like melancholy, for example, it comes up over and over again in Christmas Carol. So those kind of words, like maybe have 3 or 4 ready to go that you're going to try and put into your creative writing piece, and you should be able to manipulate those words in, and that might help you hit the mark scheme if you're struggling with vocabulary. What I would say about planning for a story versus planning for a describe would be the following. So with a story, avoid making it too complicated. What I'm going to do, sorry, it keeps cutting out, is add in loads and loads of characters. So I would keep it to 1 or 2 characters in your story, 1 setting, and then just have a really clear introduction of the setting and the character. Introduce some kind of catalyst, like, and that might be another character, and then which is going to cause conflict, and then slowly build up the rising action into a climax, and that would be enough. You don't want to write loads and loads. With the description, you need to just be aware that with a description, not lots should happen. So it can absolutely be the first person, as in I, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to have a situation where you've included lots of action, because otherwise you're writing a story, you're not writing a describe. So you should be focusing on different things. So like it was said, I don't know, describe a beautiful view, I don't know, of a sea, for example, or something like that, or a field. You might look at the horizon, you might concentrate on the weather, you might focus on the foliage, like the trees and things, and then maybe some nature. If you're really stuck and you're thinking, oh no, you know what, I can't think of anything else to describe, either from a picture or from your imagination, you can put a character into that scene and describe them as well, and that's fine as long as they are in the scene that you've been told to describe. So that's kind of helpful. What I would say, anything else for the describe? The key thing really is to vary your sentence structures, vary your punctuation and your vocabulary. Make sure you write in paragraphs, ideally with something clever like bookending or repetition or one line paragraphs. Anything like that would work really well. Okay, so then you've done that, you've done 45 minutes. That means in the first 45 minutes, you have already done half of your exam in terms of marks. Then I would go on to the next section. So start at question 1. Now, question 1 is worth 4 marks. And so then I would recommend that you spend 9 minutes on it. Now, people will be like, well, I've only got a list for things. Why would I spend 9 minutes? And that's because I would recommend that you read the extract in that time as well. So you read the extract, and as you're reading the extract, just note down in the margin the key things that were happening. Why? Because that's going to help you later on when you get to your question 3, when you've got to talk about the structure, because you'll have the notes of what happens down the side. So you're going to read it, and that's going to take you about 5 minutes, and then maybe even 6, and then you'll have the list 4 things. With the list 4 things, a couple of ways you can get that wrong. One, you can write about implicit things, not just explicit. So the question for this one is asking for explicit things, so the bloody obvious, basically. Don't try and be clever. Don't do any kind of real inferences. Just if it says, how does it describe the room? Just be like, the room is blue, the room is big, that kind of stuff. Don't be like, oh, maybe it's owned by a really rich person. They don't want you to just do clever stuff with inference. What they want you to do is say what's actually on the page. You can quote, but you don't need to. And I would recommend you writing short little sentences. A way to get it wrong, George, is to write about the wrong section. Please don't do that, because you will lose up to 4 marks, and that would be a shame. The next one is question 2. That is worth 8 marks. And so obviously the rule is that you just add 5. So that would be 13 minutes. Another thing that's it's quite handy to do. Lots of people ask me how much they should write. And I would say broadly, the number of the question is the number of paragraphs you should write. So question 2, I would say 2 paragraphs is sufficient. And here you're just focusing on language. So you can pick out devices or you can pick out individual words, but you get marks for 3 things. So 1, subject terminology, so metaphor, simile, verb, noun, whatever. 2, textual detail, so that will be individual words or little phrases as long as they are a simile or a metaphor. And then finally, effect. Effect is the thing that you get the most marks for, and effect is essentially, if you're doing individual words, any connotations, things you associate with the word, and anything it makes you think, feel or imagine. So I don't know, if you had the word, I can't think of the word now, ripped, and it was referring to, like, I don't know, ripping someone's hair out, you might talk about it being sharp and that it's sounding like it's been properly torn, it's broken, it happens quickly. When you rip something, usually it's something like paper, so that implies that it's something that you could rip quite easily, which shows the kind of force and aggression that it's been pulled out with. When something's ripped, it's all ragged, and so you might then say that the hair's been ripped out raggedly. So all of those things would be a way to analyse language, and essentially what you're saying is, why did they use the word ripped and not a different word like cut or pulled or whatever? So you talk about what the words make you think, feel and imagine, and equally you can do that about similes or personification, as long as you talk about the effect. So if you do a simile or a metaphor and you do the effect, make sure you talk about why they've compared it to the thing they've compared it to, because that's what a simile or metaphor does, it compares. So when it says, you know, the moon was like a wishing well, yeah, because it's round, and the reason that they've compared the moon to the wishing well is because of the atmosphere that you get from a wishing well. So a wishing well makes you think that things are possible and exciting, and they give you hope, and maybe there is something you associate with being a child. So that makes the moon hopeful and the thing that will create wishes, etc., etc. So you've got to think about why they've done what they've done, and that's what the language question's getting you to do. If you want to get the top band, you need to look at the cumulative effect of language. So pick out a few bits of language, like language choices, and either talk about the semantic field, which is a range of words that all create a similar effect. So you're talking about how they build up language to create an image, an overall image or atmosphere. Then you move on to question 3. Again, this is a 13-minute question because it's worth 8 marks, so you just add 5, 13 minutes. It's really important that you stick to these timings because otherwise you screw yourself over. Just move on. So to be clear about this, with AQA, when you hit the mark scheme, what you do is, as an examiner, you just tick off where they've hit the mark scheme. So in that question, subject, terminology, textual detail, effect. Even if you've only done it once, that's enough. So don't write a gazillion paragraphs where you're still just hitting the same bit of the mark scheme because it won't get any more marks. So just do as much as you can, but when you run out of time, move on to the next question because you'll get more marks by moving on than you will by carrying on. Right, this question 3 is a structure question. So you're only going to get marks for talking about the order of the text. So why something comes before something else. So you can talk about a change of focus. That works quite well. And you might talk about beginning, middle and end. That's fine. But you can also focus on features like juxtaposing or repetition. But really you need to think about positioning. So why is something before something else? So for example, if you're introduced to a key character, what does that tell you about the character? Well, usually it tells you that that character is an important character and that they're someone you should emotionally invest to because they're going to be the protagonist, usually. You might want to talk about the person, as in first person or third person. That counts as a structural device. That's quite an easy one to prepare for too, because you know you can say quite a lot about the fact that something's in the first person because it makes you feel like you're seeing it from their perspective. So it gives you a sense of empathy because you're experiencing it with them. Well, you can write that regardless of what kind of text you get, if it's in the first person. If it's in the third person, you might talk about a sense of distance. For tense, that counts as a structural feature. So you could talk about, if it's in the past tense, this sense of kind of it's already happened and therefore there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas if you talk about in the present tense, if it's in the present tense, there's a sense of urgency, like you're experiencing it at the particular time. And those kind of basic comments on effect would be able to get you up to level 2, which is half marks for that question. People did very badly in that question last year, so it's really worth trying to pick up a few extra marks there. And then finally, you get to question 4. So question 4 is an important question. It is worth noting, right, that question 4 is worth the same amount of marks as question 1, 2 and 3 added together. So you really can't like not do it and not spend your time on it. So it's worth 20 marks, which means you spend 25 minutes on it. So your last 25 minutes, you've got some serious stamina for this one. And this one's gonna, you get marks for 4 things. So the question itself asks you to respond to a statement. So it usually says, a student having read this section of a text said, and then said something. And you've got to decide whether you agree or disagree. You can do either or a bit of both. That is fine. But you must clearly express what you think about the statement and why you think it, and then give me an example from the text that proves it. So you might say, so like the statement says, I feel sorry for the students because their exams are really hard and they seem stressed out. So you might say, I strongly agree that I feel sorry for the students because their exams are really difficult and they clearly are stressed out. I'm just going back into question 4, live stream. Give me 1 sec. Hello, sorry about that. My battery ran out, so my bad. Yeah, sorry about that. So I just wanted to just briefly finish with question 4. So with question 4, as I said, you've got to respond to a statement, and with that statement, it will be some inane thing that is, you know, you can either disagree with it or agree with it or agree a bit with it, and that's fine. And so the first thing you need to do is obviously read the text and decide whether you agree or disagree, and make sure that you write about the right section of the text. So it will always be a section, so make sure you pick the right section. If you write about anything outside of the section, you won't get any marks for it, so don't do that. And once you've picked the section, I would just be picking a few things, maybe a couple of events, and then some language devices or structural devices that make you agree or disagree with the statement. And it's question 4, so I'd recommend it's about 4 paragraphs. And I would recommend a couple of those paragraphs might be more like what you would consider AO1 paragraphs. So what happened, like, say, so first of all, I agree or disagree with the statement and how much you do, so I strongly disagree or whatever, and then say why you think that. So I think I was given an example a second ago about students finding exams difficult because they're really hard and that they're stressful. So I would say I strongly agree that the exams are really difficult and that makes the students feel stressed out. And then I would say why, because all of the exams have turned into terminal exams, and so they have to do lots of revision. An example from the text, and then go in and give a quotation. So like, I've got 15 exams to study, 6 of them are science or whatever. And then once I've got that, and I would say the reason that this seems so stressful is because 15 is such a large number and it feels like they've got an awful lot to do. And then I might go into a method. So I could either talk about a method within that quote, or I can look somewhere else in the text and pick a different method. So that might be the structure that the writers used, it might be punctuation, it might be the language or similes or metaphors, it can be any of those things, but you have to do the effect and how that makes you think about the statement. So for example, it might say the writer uses an exclamation mark, and this makes me think that the student is speaking passionately, and perhaps that shows that they are stressed out. So it's those kind of things. So you must pick out a method and do the effect, but what's important is that you link that back into how much that makes you agree or disagree with the statement. And what's important, because you're trying to be evaluative here, so you have to say, okay, this method, they use this individual word. So I don't know, I haven't, so like I haven't slept in days. Say for example, a student, that was in part of the text. And then you might say they've used hyperbole, because obviously they probably have slept in days, even if it's not very much. So you'd say the writer uses hyperbole when they say the students haven't slept in days. And this serves to show that it feels like that they're so busy revising and thinking about their exams that they haven't had any sleep at all, when in fact they probably have had some. This reflects how hard they're having to work because their exams are so difficult, and also could show that they are really, really stressed out, because one symptom of being really stressed out is not being able to sleep. So you just always take everything you say and you link it back to the statement. And then to try to be really evaluative, you want to try and use, there's a couple of techniques you can use, but one is just using adverbs. So things like clearly, evidently, importantly, those kind of things, extremely. So you're saying how much something is. So extremely, marginally. So you're kind of rating it. They really help your tone to feel evaluative. And the other one is to use modal verbs. So things like it could be interpreted arguably. Sorry, modal verb. So it could be, it may be, it might be interpreted, those kind of words. So could, would, should doesn't really work in that one, but could, might, may all work really, really well. I am going to go now, and I'm going to be on Twitter. So if you've got any questions that you want answering, go for it. In terms of predictions, that there aren't really predictions for this exam. What I can tell you is that the questions will be the same. It will be the same question every single time. Question 5 I started with, Ellie, so you can go back to start the other video because question 5 is the one that you should be doing first. What I would say is I'll be on Twitter. I can answer any questions. Yeah, good luck tomorrow. I won't do any predictions other than to say the questions will be the same every time. Question 1 will be a list 4 things. Question 2 will be how has the writer used language to whatever it is. Question 3 will always be how has the writer structured the text to interest the reader. Question 4 will always be a statement and then how far do you agree or disagree with this statement. And then question 5 will always be a choice, so pick one, a story or a story opening or a describe, and there will always be a picture. But there won't always be a story and a describe to choose from. So you might get 2 describes, you might get 2 stories, etc, etc. It's hilarious that you're correcting the spelling of my name. Anyway, hope you have a lovely evening, and I'm sorry, I know you've got lots of revision to do. Let me know if you get stuck, and I will be in, for my guys, I'll be in tomorrow. Wear your lucky socks, and I'll try and bring some breakfast and stuff. Okay, bye! Oh, how do I stop this? There. Okay, bye!